Well, I am graced by the incredible Richard Garcia. Ever so kind of you to join me. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Alex. I appreciate it.
So, you have a quite remarkable reputation. You used to be a staunch Democrat. Correct me if I'm wrong, right?
Mhm.
Well, how staunch were you? You mean extra starch, or what kind of, what are we talking here?
Well, uh, tradition, I've always viewed myself when I was a Democrat as what you would refer to as a blue dog Democrat.
Okay.
So those are fairly conservative Democrats. But yes, I was a Democrat for basically all of my life up until a few years ago, where I've left the Democratic Party and I've walked away from the party, and I'm now a conservative. And I'm a Republican, but here in Virginia, you don't actually register by party, but I do vote Republican.
Wow. Okay. So I mean, in today's climate, that's a pretty major change. So what do you mind walking through that? I mean, a little from how you got from Blue Dog Democrat to, because you're, doesn't sound like you're a total leftist. Blue Dogs, as you said, are, a little bit more conservative. They're more conservative than Pelosi, right?
They're more conservative than Pelosi. Well, for me, it was a when I did my walk away. For me, it was a gradual process, and it's taken time. And I don't think that overnight I have become a conservative. This was a number of years. But I think one of the biggest factors as to why I left the Democratic Party is because I feel the Democratic Party has left me. Um, and the Democratic Party has moved so far left that it's basically left a lot of people displaced where they no longer identify with the party. And I think what the real trigger moment for me was when Tom Perez said that Ocasio Cortez, someone who ran on the socialist ticket, was the future of the Democratic
I
Party.
remember that. I remember that. Yeah.
Yes, that was the nail in the coffin where I knew that the Democratic Party was intending to go in the opposite of direction. They weren't going to be moderates. They were going to go far left. And for me, that was enough. And I was like, okay, I'm done with the Democratic Party. And I've said I'm going to embrace the conservative principles that I have that I don't see at all, even the small remnants of in the Democratic Party as it is today and where it's going.
So I want to drill down a little bit more into you. What gave you your, well, as they turned out to be, conservative principles?
Mhm. Well, for me, that evolved over a number of years. Well, first, I served 8 years in the United States Army.
Wow,
Um,
thank you. The 8 years. Wow, thank you very much for your service.
Thank you. 8 years. I think you see that's where I started to develop a lot of my conservative principles and ideology. It's one thing to think something, it's another thing when you're actually living it, when you're on the front line and you're seeing these things. And you'll see that a lot of people who are prior military, they tend to be very conservative. And even when they are a Democrat, they tend to lean more conservative on the Democratic spectrum. They're more on towards the right even
Right.
when they are. Now, there's no absolutes, but it's general. Military folks tend to be more conservative. I think that's where it developed, and it started to develop over the years. But it's been a long process. It wasn't a quick like one day I just woke up and said I'm not a Democrat.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's true with virtually any major conversion, if you will. Most of the time, it's not quite. Who was it? Horowitz, or he actually saw some of people he thought were his friends kill somebody in front of him. It's not usually that dramatic, but so it was the military, you say, but what made you more of the Democrat side? Because I mean, Tom Perez, he only made those comments, what, 2018? That was about a year ago. So you've only planted your flag in the conservative sand very recently. So
Right.
what was your stance on Trump in 2016?
So I didn't vote for President Trump in 2016. Um, so you can see where now I am supporting President Trump, and I will be voting for him in 2020. But for me, I wasn't there yet to vote for Trump. I wasn't there yet in 2016. Although I knew he was going to win.
Really?
Going to win. Yeah, I knew back in 2015 that I knew back in 2015 that not that Trump but I knew
Sure.
someone like Trump was going to win. That I knew because I saw what was the shift that was occurring in America.
So what got you? So after you left the army, right? After you left the army, what got you involved in politics?
So I've been in, well, I guess it depends on what you mean by involved. I've been politically engaged my entire life. I've always been interested in politics. Um, so I think for me, it was just part of my nature. I think politics is very important. It's something that we all Americans should be engaged about and be involved in, regardless of what their political beliefs or ideologies are. So I've always been involved in politics.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, but what, I'm trying to picture you, this guy, fresh out of the military, you're sitting, you had this conversation with him. All right, now what? What kind of led you to, I know, I guess I'll do something political. Well, what brought you there?
Well, like I said, I've always been interested in politics. So after I got out the military, I went to, well, the reason I got out was to go to law school.
Oh,
So I was in law school here in the city at GW. And so I was like, well, I'm in law school, I'm here in the nation's capital. So let me, I should start doing some internships, when I have my summers off.
yeah.
So I did both legal internships and politically aligned internships or more policy related. So I did the White House internship. I worked at the Senate Budget Committee for the minority staff, and I worked at one of the agencies here in DC, doing more legal stuff, which also had a policy slant.
Okay, so didn't you get indoctrinated, or didn't you love the Democratic Party more because you're working with them? That's kind of what happens, right? When you rub elbows with these people, right?
Well, for me, no, because and so that was part of the reasons. So what led me to leave the Democratic Party. So I previously served as a White House intern for President Obama, and then I worked on the Senate Budget Committee for the minority staff. When I actually started to delve into the policies and then the implications of these policies, that's what really started to push me away from the Democratic Party. What I truly believe, and this is where I part company with a lot of people on the opinion of the Democratic Party. A lot of people try to picture the Democratic Party as this evil, diabolical, institution hell bent on world domination. It's crazy.
George Soros. Yeah, right.
George Soros. And honestly, that's not the case. I've never felt the Democratic Party and the Democrats to be evil or diabolical. I truly do believe that they have good intentions. But what I've seen is I look past the intent and I look at the effects of their policies, and their intent is good, but the effects of their policies are detrimental, especially to inner city communities. And so when I started to look past the intent and looked at the effects, that's when I no longer started to identify with the Democratic Party because there's an old saying, how does it go? The good intentions, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I feel that's what the Democratic Party is. And that's why I started to move away from the Democratic Party.
So it sounds like you're of the opinion that Democrats could be turned with a reasonable argument, right? Do you believe that?
Oh, what do you mean that the Democrats you could win?
Well, if they have good intentions, then it seems that all that's need to be done to turn a Democrat to a conservative is just simply explain to them how Democrat policies really do not have good results. So is that true? If they're not evil, if they really don't want power and they don't want, this, that, and the other thing, they just want, good things to happen, then it's right. It sounds like all that we need is to give them a reasonable argument. Would you agree with that?
I would agree to that to an extent. I think when you look at it, there's a spectrum, right? There's people who were like me, who were the blue dog Democrats. Those would be the easiest people that you could win over because they are already conservative, but for whatever reason, they're not voting with what they identify with. So one, that's the block you can win over, because you just have to explain to them, hey, look, make a list of everything that you believe in, and then let's line it up with your party. Does it correspond? And then by and large, except unless you're being unless you're being like a one issue voter, nothing's lining up with the Democratic Party. So be a Republican or be a conservative. So I think the blue dogs, that's where you're going to see a lot of movement, or you could see a lot of movement. Then the next spectrum are like the moderates, and you could see some movement in winning them over. Now, I think when you come to the far left, like the socialists, the communists,
would you say if Nancy Pelosi and Hillary Clinton, where would you say they lie? Would you call them blue dog Democrat, or would you put them in the far left category?
I wouldn't personally. I wouldn't call Hillary or Nancy Pelosi as a far left. I guess I would put them left of moderate. Now, when you get into like Bernie, Ocasio-Cortez, those kind of people, then you're really getting into the far left. Now, I think those people are going to be very difficult to win over because they're so far left.
Okay, so would you put someone, say, like Joe Manchin, Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, into the blue dog spectrum? Would you say that?
So Joe Manchin is a definite blue dog. So when I was a Democrat, that is the kind of person that when I was a Democrat, that's the kind of person that I would want to have worked for if I was given the opportunity.
Okay.
Because he more aligns with what I felt at that time when I was a Democrat.
Okay. Well, we're running out of time for this particular segment, but Richard, I'm so happy that you were able to join me for this. You gave such great insight. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, Alex.